What's up, YouTubers? Welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to do a special showcase here on a certain basher that you may have seen on the channel doing some high flying and acrobatics. This is the Tekno ET48.3. So let's take a little time today to run through it and see why it's such a unique basher. So this is not technically my truck. It's Craig's truck, my buddy who you've seen on the channel many times.
Is this your bumper in piece? No.
He is the long jump champion. 5 seconds. Oh, he landed it. He landed it. That's time. Craig is over. This doesn't count.
And this particular truck is cool because it's really built as a racer. It comes as a kit. And but some people use them as bashers too. As you can see, it's got a very narrow chassis, much more narrow than any of the bashers I have. All right, so here's a comparison to show you what I mean. On the left, we have the Tekno, very narrow, slender body. And over here, we have the V6 Kraton, a traditional basher. It's a good comparison also to see the length. The wheelbase on this Tekno is pretty long. These are both have the same back flips tires, and they're both positioned on their back wheels here. And you can see it edges it out a bit on the Tekno there. So we can look at the width, and this particular truck has some modifications that make that different, such as it's got 5mm hub extenders on this, which makes it wider than it typically would be from the factory. Let's see how that compares. So actually the Kraton is still a little bit wider here, just by a hair, but so that shows, you know, this is a narrow, long wheelbase track racer, but with those hub extenders, it makes it a little more capable bashing. I'll put this Kraton away, but in a bit, I'll bring it back out to compare something else. One of the really cool things that I've noticed about this truck when Craig's bashing it is that it launches super high into the air.
Let's go.
There it is. That's the high flyer right there.
Probably the highest one I've seen yet.
I find that it seems to launch higher than other trucks. I think that may have to do with the weight, and so we'll check that in a bit. So this particular truck has some mods on it. You've got some M2C parts here in the front, this chassis brace along the center, as well as this chassis brace in the rear. And then those hub extenders that I mentioned earlier are M2C as well. The electronic setup is one that you would find in a Team Corrali vehicle. So it's got the Curon 825 as well as the ESC that's basically a rebranded Hobbywing Max 8. And these are really fast out of the box, so it's a good setup to put in here. The other components of it are stock. Let's talk about maybe some of the pros and the cons that Craig has noticed making this racer be a basher. Some of the downsides is that because it's a racer, it's not necessarily, the parts on it are not necessarily built as tough as a typical basher would be. So the shock towers bend fairly easily. Some of these extra padding and sort of like support for crashes are a little better on the Kraton here, such as this front bumper or the skid plate that comes stock on it. So as you can see, he put on this front bumper, but it wouldn't have come with its stock. And there's nothing in the rear, nor is there any skid plates on the bottom. The battery tray is smaller than typical bashing battery trays, which limits the use of certain batteries. Again, because it's typically a race vehicle, it's built for race lipos that are more compact. So that's a little bit of a limiting factor here. So as far as some of the upsides, because this is built as a racer, it's pretty lightweight, and that makes this launch so high in the air. On the other hand, because it's a longer wheelbase, it's not great for doing a bunch of flips. This is a high flyer and a sailor, but you're not going to be getting double or triple flips very easily on this, just because of that. So because this drive shaft is so long, it's got a really nice sturdy support brace coming across here. And that is a big advantage when it comes to not bending drive shafts. This drive shaft back in the rear is really short, so that limits how much that's going to bend. So I think you're pretty well off set up the way that Tekno makes these drive shafts. So adding M2C parts definitely helps with the durability, but because it's a racer, it's not going to be as durable. However, because it's so lightweight, that helps. I've noticed some trucks that I build up, such as ones like this, where I put all sorts of extra modified parts on it. Although it's sturdier and thicker, it's a lot heavier, and so that can tend to break things in and of itself, just because it's such a heavy weight slamming down on the ground whenever you crash or do big air. So for that reason, this nice lightweight basher is really nice in terms of durability. Let's check out that weight now and compare it with the Kraton. So this V6 Kraton only has a couple additions. This M2C chassis skid plate and this chassis brace back here are really the only mods. Whereas this has a couple M2C parts as well. So I think it's a pretty fair comparison. They both have the backflip tires on, so those should be the same weight. These are the 6S tires. So let's test it out. First we'll start with the Kraton. This should be our typical weight of a typical basher. It doesn't have to be the Kraton, but that's just what I'm using. All right, so we've got 12 pounds 5 ounces for the V6 Kraton here with what I've got on it. And now let's compare that with this Tekno ET48.3. Wow, huge difference. So this is 10 pounds 1.6 ounces. Over 2 pounds lighter for this thing. That's significant, especially in the world of RCs when you're not dealing with huge weights. So over 2 pounds difference for this basher it makes a world of difference. As far as part availability, this is not going to be quite as nice as Arrma, where they're everywhere. And then when you're talking about an older model like this, the ET48.3, since it's outdated and they no longer make this model, the parts are going to be harder and harder to find. So if you were to do this, it might make sense to do a brand new Tekno model and try to bash it that way. But then again, you're talking about a very expensive race bred truck that would be hard to go bash it and send it tumbling, So you might pick up a used one if you're really interested. It's just that you've got to search a little harder for parts. So everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video on this unique Tekno basher here. I certainly liked learning about it and showing it off. So see you in the next video. Take care.